welcome back to the Square Body War Wagon project. What you're looking at is an easy-inch block. It actually gives you a 1-inch lift. It's a lift block, but it's actually not really for a lift block. It replaces the overload spring in an off-road truck. And you'll notice there's 3 holes, so you can set your axle front to back, forward or backwards. We're going to put it on the rear axle. We're going to put the shim back in there. This is a 6-degree shim to make sure my pinion angle is right. But I thought I'd show you how to do this. I've seen some other videos and they're not showing how to actually do it correctly. So if you look at this thing, it's flat on the bottom. This side goes down to the axle. This side goes up to the leaf springs. It's also milled on the inside on each end, and then in the center it's milled on the top. They did that so that if you're going to center it, you just leave this hole and you come right through here with your center bolt, and your center bolt comes through the center like that, and this bolt lines up and pins through your spring perch on your axle, which I'll show you. I've got it part way apart, so I'll show you how to do all of this to start with, and then I'll show you how to do it safely. Then when you put it the other way, if you're going to move it forward or backwards 1 inch, you'll notice they're not the same. One is 1 inch and one is 1.5 inches. Depends on what you want to do. Forward or backwards, it'll move either way. If you're going to move it one way or the other, this pin that goes through the leaf spring, which is actually that pin right there. There's one that's actually installed in the center. And I'm going to move mine back. If you're going to move it, the pin that goes through the leaf spring will go in one end, and it'll actually countersink into here so that this pin actually hides. The center pin, you will take your old pin and go through the center, run the bolt down so that the bolt actually goes here. The nut goes there, excuse me. You'll run the bolt up through, run the nut down all the way down, and then you'll cut it off with a cutoff wheel, which I'll show you how to do that. We're going to take this one right here and we're going to do that. It's going to go through here in the center. So there's always a center bolt sticking out so that it centers on the axle. This holds the spring side to side and front to back, center on the axle. Now you're going to move it back 1 inch, so this will go through here and this will be centered on the axle, but the actual spring will be moved back here. So the center of the spring will be here, not here. So what we're going to do, we're going to move it back. So we're actually going to move the front of the spring here so that the axle actually moves back away from the front end of the truck. So I'll show you here in just a minute. Jack this truck up, and you're going to need to jack the frame up and block the frame. I like these 12-ton jack stands. I put them all the way across, and I put 2 on there so the truck is very solid. Then you're also going to need a jack underneath of the rear end, the differential, because you're going to need to let these springs all the way down, and you're going to need to drop the axle away from the springs. Once you do that, once you take the weight, you're going to just hold it up just enough, and you're going to pull the U-joints off, or U-joints, excuse me, the U-bolts. The U-bolts are going to be on both sides of the axle, up this way. There are a few that the U-bolts are upside down, and they point down. Most of them point up. You're going to remove this. There will be a spring plate on top that looks like this. You'll notice that with this one, it actually doesn't fit on there. That's because we're not going to use this one. This is a factory one. The actual spring plate that we're going to use, I have on the other side of the truck. We'll walk around there so you can see that. This is what the spring plate we're going to use will look like. It's quite a bit thicker. There's a factory one right there. You can compare the two. The factory one, it just has this bend in it to clear that bolt, the center bolt with the nut on it. And it's about this thick. I believe it's 1/4 of an inch. This one is actually 3/8 of an inch thick. And it leaves you a little bit of room to move front to back for the U-bolts, but it also has these 3 holes, allowing you to move the axle forward or backward. So these ones are set, this particular top plate is built for moving it 1 inch forward or 1 inch backwards. We're actually only going to move it 1 inch, so it works perfectly for me. If you're going to move it the 1.5 inches, then you would need to actually mill one of these out a little bit further. Take a Dremel tool or grinder and grind it out just a little bit to make room for that center bolt. That center bolt's still going to stick through the top, and it's going to be off on the top. You're going to need this plate to be centered for the U-bolts on the axle. So this will allow you to center it on the axle and still have the springs in a different place. You're going to need to take C-clamps like this and clamp these springs because they're under pressure. They're a leaf spring, and if you don't clamp them, they will come apart when you pull that out, and you'll have one awesome time trying to get that pin back through there. So clamp them together, then you can put that center bolt back through there with no problem. This is where we're at here. I will go back and grab the easy inch plate and show you how to make those work. Here's our shim plate that goes underneath. The shim plate always goes against the axle itself. And here's our easy inch plate. This is the pin that came out of the springs. We're going to reuse this pin for the bottom for the center bolt. I have a new pin that came with the spring plates that will go all the way through, and we'll use it on whichever end we're going to use. We're going to use the 1 inch. So it will go through here, and we'll need to grind it off. You're going to run the pin through here, then you're going to have to grind the end off because it sticks up just a little bit out the bottom right here. This is going to have to fit flat like that, flush. That pin will be inside sticking up like this, and then this pin will actually go through both of these plates. And then we'll have to cut it off as well and make sure that it's flush so that it doesn't hit the springs when this one actually goes up through the springs. Here's our brand new bolt that came with it. This one's actually going to go through the center pin on the springs. So we're going to use the 1 inch hole, which is this one, and it will go through there. But you'll notice if I hold this up, it actually sticks up just a little teeny bit too much. We have to clearance that so that this plate will fit on top of there without having that gap. See where that's hitting there? So what we're going to do is we're going to put it on the grinder, grind the end of it off just a little bit so that it fits underneath of there. Okay, we're going to bring this pin over here to the bench grinder. We're going to take it out of here. We're going to grind it actually on this one right here. We're going to grind it in a circle motion until it's far enough that it clearances that, and this fits under there perfectly. So it'll fit right through there. We'll check it a few times and I'll show you when I'm there. I'm not going to do this on camera because it's going to be really loud. Now remember, there are a couple of things to remember. This is a grade 8 bolt, and so you don't want to grind it too hard and too long on the grinder because you'll overheat it. So you want to grind it a little bit, dip it, grind it a little bit, dip it in some water, keep it cool. You do not want it to get too hot and lose its temper. So what we've done is we've went ahead and ground this down. So we'll look at this plate. This is our hole. Drop it down through there. See that? Does not stick up above the hole. Just barely clearances that flat edge. So if we have the bolt through there, we have the shim plate on the top, the shim plate fits flush and there's no space. So with our center bolt in place, with the 1 inch hole, the center bolt, the spring's actually going to be on top of here. So we're going to take our angle plate, our shim plate, then make sure our pinion angle is correct. And if you notice, these are not actually perfectly shimmed on both sides. It's has a little bit of a flat spot right here, right there. You want the longest flat surface on your axle. So this will be on your spring perch right here. I want this side forward because I want to tilt my pinion yoke. I want my pinion to point down. That's what this shim is for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right here. Remember, if I move the spring forward, the axle moves backwards. So it's going to go like that. And I'm going to take the old bolt, that's this one. I'm going to run it through this one, through the shim plate. There's a hole there. I'll go through there, come on. It's going to go through that plate, and it's also going to go through this plate. Then we're going to put the nut back on it. We'll take an extension in a deep well socket and run that all the way down and tighten it up on there. Then we're going to take a grinder and we're going to cut this one off. There's your plates. Have the long flat surface against the axle. Make sure that it's facing forward. The bolt's in the forward because I want my axle to move back. So the center bolt. Okay, now I'm going to take a deep well socket, and you're going to need to hold this because this isn't square on the end, it's round, so you're going to need a pair of vice grips to grab it. You're also going to notice that I put a little bit of blue Loctite right in here. It doesn't hurt to put some blue Loctite on there. It's a good idea. You don't plan on this coming apart, and it'll help hold it. We're going to do this, and then we're going to probably going to go get a extension to start with. There we go. And we got to go get an extension because we're going to need to go all the way down in there. We got our extension. We'll notice that this actually sticks up here a little bit, just a very little bit. So what we're going to do, see it in there, it actually sticks up just a little bit in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put this extension in there just a little bit. And there we go. We just want it good and tight. It doesn't spin, it's tight. The two joints are together. You want to make sure that your plates are square. If they're not, you can lay it down on a concrete floor or something really hard, tap it with a hammer and make sure that they're square. Now we're going to take our angle grinder and we're going to cut this one off flush. We're going to take the angle grinder here and we're going to cut this off. Not going to be able to see what I'm doing because I'm actually going to do it like this. Maybe you can see it. We're going to cut this right here. We're going to be really careful with this because we don't want to mar up this as much as possible. It'll be against the leaf spring, so it won't really hurt it very much. But we just want to cut this bolt off, and then we want to grind it to make sure that it's flush in there. And we don't want to touch this bolt. We took our angle grinder, we cut it off, we faced it this way, we cut it off, then we laid it down like this, and we took our angle grinder carefully and ground it like this until you could just see some little marks on the sides. Basically, it just took the paint off on the sides right there, and that's all. But that makes sure that it's completely flush underneath of there so that it won't hit the springs. See that? Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab this again for good measure. We're going to make sure that we're still tight because we did put a grinder on there. Yep, and all we're doing is we're spinning on the inside. See that? We're not spinning anything. Alright, we are tight. We've got some blue Loctite on there. We're going to go ahead and install this on the spring. We're back over to the leaf spring. We're going to take our spring pad here, our easy inch, we're going to go up through the bottom of that center hole. So it's actually going to be, we're going to have to sit this down a little bit because I got to pick the leaf spring up. Because of how tall of a lift is on this truck, I had to take the rear leaf spring out of its hanger and bring it up on top. So it's out of the shackle and it's up on top of there so that I can pick the leaf spring up and have more room to move it. We're going to pick it up. We're going to put that center bolt back through that hole. Show you how to tighten that center bolt with this in there, because this actually spins. So you have to grab it with a pair of vice grips underneath of here. I may need to go get needle nose vice grips. We'll have to look and see. Ring is not light. Okay, now what we're going to find, by moving an inch backwards, my C-clamp's in the way. So what I'm going to do, I've already got my pin all the way through there. I'm going to reach down here and get my nut to put on there. I'll put my nut on and spin it down as far as I can. Now the C-clamps are not necessary once you have that bolt through there. Once that center pin's through there, it's going to hold all these leaf springs in order. So we're going to take this one off because there's not enough room for it. We'll slide it back a little ways. Probably still going to leave it a little bit tight or snug to help us get that bolt through there. There we go. And we're still hitting it just a little bit. There we go. We got it pushed up far enough. We'll spin this bolt or this nut down snug on the bottom of there. Now remember, the center pin is here, but our actual pin is back here. So we're going to move, the axle will actually move back on the spring. I can use my vice grips on the top of this because we're going to cut this bolt off anyway. So you take your vice grips on the top of there. Yeah, that's not tight enough. Not even close. I'm going to have to go get a 9/16 end wrench to get a hold of that. There. Well, I got ahead of myself. You get this snug, you're going to want to use the box end of the end wrench. That way you don't strip out your nut on top. What we'll do, pull the vice grips off, run the end wrench down so that it's a box end. Oh, actually I almost forgot. We're going to loosen that back up because we're going to put some blue Loctite on there. If you haven't noticed already, I love Loctite. It works really well. The blue holds very well, but is removable. The red normally will take heat and is very hard to remove. It's intended to be mostly permanent, semi-permanent. They do have stuff that is called Roxette that actually is permanent. Okay, put our vice grips back on here. Watch your fingers. And very tight is perfect. You'll notice it's a little bit off right here. We'll take a hammer, tap that over and get it right. You'll notice that it is where it's supposed to be. We can pull the C-clamps off. Maybe able to tap that just a little bit with a C-clamp. I'll use a hammer. It's gonna work a lot better anyway. We'll pull this off of here. Okay, no need for the C-clamps. Okay, I used my little hammer, tap that over there so it's flush with both sides. Jack the axle up and attach the axle to the leaf spring. But before we jack the axle up at all, I'm going to pull the leaf spring out up there, come down and around, and we'll see if we can do it without jacking the axle to start with. Make sure that we've got room, nothing's catching. It's going to take a little bit of movement, so I'm going to shut this off for just a second and make sure we don't have anything on the other side catching us. Okay, we had a jack stand on the other side that was holding us up. So we moved it over just a little bit. We're going to put our U-bolt plate on the top here. And the center bolt's going to be off, so we're going to need to go back. We'll put this U-bolt on the other side. Whoops. Put a washer on there, a washer on the other side. Throw both of our U-bolts on there to kind of hold it, and then we'll use the jack to push it up into place as we work the axle to make sure that that center pin goes in that hole. To center it, it's going to go in the hole on here. There's a hole in the center of that you saw. We're going to put the center pin in that hole. This pin will be forward, so the axle will be pushed back. There we go. So we got our new U-bolt plate on. Whoops. I'll do this. There we go. We'll set that right there for now. So what we'll do is we'll get under there and get the jack lined up and see if we can jack it up and get it jacked into position. Okay, it's a little easier to get this lined up if I put this rear spring hanger shackle back in place and get it bolted back on so that the spring's back down and it holds the spring still when we're trying to do this. Before I started doing this and making this more of a pain in the butt for myself, I got started on the other side over there to get it the way I wanted it first. So something that was hanging me up is my traction bar was actually stopping me from moving anything, which it was doing its job. So I unbolted my traction bar to get everything, and I may need to change the shackle lengths on my traction bar. So I put the U-bolts back in, I put the shackle back on the spring, jack the spring up. You're gonna wanna take a light and look in between here. Make sure that your center hole is lined up just right. Make sure that your bolt's coming through the hole in the front of this plate. And I put all these these are on by hand. They're all movable by hand. And I'm going to slowly tighten these down and make sure that this hole's lined up. And when it's lined up and I get it, I'll tighten them equally around the sides. I'll show you how to do that. We'll go ahead and use a hand wrench for now. Give it about 3 ratchets there, and then I'll go to the back. I'm going to give a couple there. So what I'm trying to do is make these even, so they're even in between And then you're also going to want to check and make sure that your bolts are not spread out on the bottom. And a lot of times I'll take a hammer and check that, but they look really good. We'll keep doing that by hand. Now they may be a little bit shorter in the front than the back due to, like this one actually has that, or this axle actually has that angle in there to drop the pinion point down. That makes a difference. See where we're at, make sure we're getting lined up with our spring. Everything should be good, everything looks all right. Pull my light down and look underneath of here. Yep, we look good with our spring. I'm going to go ahead and use an impact wrench and pull this down a little bit. This is probably super loud. I apologize. We'll pull our light down and check our hole, make sure we're lining everything up. Make sure everything's lined up good. I'm going to look at my traction bar and make sure that I'm not holding on that. I put a little jack pressure on there to make sure that it's picking it up a little bit, and the springs were holding it down a little too far so that the traction bar was actually still causing a problem because of how much the springs had dropped it down. Sometimes with the lift you're going to have some of those problems and you need to look at that. So I jacked it up just a little bit and took some of the pressure off of the traction bar. Then I also took my hammer and tapped this plate back just a little bit to make sure that this hole right here is centered. You want this bolt centered in that hole. Pull this up into place. Take our light and look back under here and make sure our holes are lined up just correctly. Looks like it is. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and pull my traction bar out. I think my traction bar is actually stopping this from going the way that I want it to. I pulled my traction bar out. You can see it there. I pulled it loose on the bottom so that it just swings. It was hanging up here on this cross member. Get a light on that. It's actually hitting right there where it's hitting right now. However, there's no pressure on it because I pulled that bolt, the bottom bolt right there, out of the front of it so that it can swing up and down. I may have to adjust that a little bit. Sometimes when you drop the springs down and everything and get everything, once everything's lined back up and the weight gets back on the truck, it'll sit right, but it won't sit right until then. Once I put the jack down, this popped right back into place. The plates popped right into place. Everything's where it should be. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these bolts down snug and then we'll torque them down. I'll give you the torque specs and everything when we get there. So I did the other side to match this side, so both of them are exactly the same. Moved it back an inch. You can see down in here, see if I can get up there, right there, my traction bar is a little bit off. I'm gonna have to cut these off and adjust them, or cut this off and adjust this bar. One way or the other. By pushing it back an inch, it went down and back an inch. Other than that, I've got the front bolted back up. Everything's good there. We're clearanced enough here. So I have everything hooked back up. Put jack stands underneath to the bottom because in order to torque these, you're going to want the weight back on the vehicle. In my Chilton's manual, it says put the weight on the vehicle or on the axles before you torque these down. Then torque these down to 140 foot-pounds each. It just go back and forth, one ratchet a piece, and it'll get it. So I will torque those down. I've already got my torque wrench set. It's good to have at least a couple of threads above the top. These U-bolts, you want between 4 threads and a half an inch. There we go. That one's good. That one's good. That one's good. There we go. All 4 of them. Those are both 4 threads. These ones are a little bit shorter than that, but they're actually sticking above there, so I'm all right. You're going to want to drive this a couple 100 miles and then recheck the torque on these to make sure that they're good. We're also going to take our angle grinder and we'll cut this off so it doesn't stick up like that. That's it. That's how you install them. That's the easy inch. The axle's back 1 inch further to the back, which centers it in the wheel well. If you actually look at the wheel well, we're centered. So there we go.